Well, welcome, Isa, to the second part of the interview. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Awesome. We're going to talk about a couple questions about disposition and effective teaching practices. There are going to be three. They're going to be about building relationships, setting high expectations for all learners, and our reflective practices. Do you have any questions before we begin?
No.
All right, let's start with the first one on building relationships. How do you build strong, positive relationships with students, especially those who may be harder to connect with? And can you give some specific examples?
Yes, definitely. In my classroom, I came into the year and it was in the half of the year. So they have already established their relationships within their classroom, and they had already established that relationship with their main teacher. And so me coming in as a student teacher, it was actually really fun because I got to meet all of them on an individual basis because I did have that other teacher's support. And through that, I built those relationships and let them know that I'm always here for them. And it took a little bit for them to adjust to me and to let them know that they can come to me for things as well. But as I started to take on more responsibility within the classroom, I got to get more relationships with those. And I did have a few students who were a little bit harder to reach. And with those students, for instance, one, he would always come into the classroom with his hood up, and he would just be very shut down, and he wouldn't really like to do his work or anything of that sort. And so every single morning, no matter what day it is, I'm always like, hello, and I always talk to him, and I'm just like, how was your weekend, or how was your night, and what did you do? And just kind of showing him that I care about him as a person instead of just him as a student. And so I always try to really build on that relationship because he does have a little bit more of a hard relationship with teachers sometimes, and so I wanted to be that support for him. And through that, I could see him starting to open up to me and kind of open his little shell. And through that, we've had lots of conversations about what he likes and what we have in common and those types of things. So whenever it comes to a difficult student or a challenging student who doesn't want to open up, I'm definitely going to go the extra mile for them always, because that's really what they need to see. They need to see that you care about them and that you support them and that you're important to them, and that they're important to you. And so through that, I would definitely make that extra mile for them. And then just throughout regular classroom with all the students, I'm always giving them positive feedback. I'm always talking to them whenever we're working together and being collaborative with them and pairing them in groups so that they can learn how to be social within their own groups. And so just really all that together, just trying to create a positive and safe classroom for them so that they always feel that they can talk to me and I always feel that I can talk to them and that we're gonna live in harmony together.
Awesome. Well, thank you. That's a great answer. I appreciate your zeal. The next question is going to be about setting high expectations for all learners, and it's this. What strategies do you use to maintain high expectations for your students while still supporting the needs of diverse learners?
Can you repeat that one more time?
Sure. What type of strategies do you maintain to set high expectations while still supporting learners with diverse needs? For example, setting a high bar but still accounting for maybe SPED or ELL or other students who may struggle.
Well, I would say, first of all, I have clear expectations and rules when you come into my classroom. Those are you can't see my classroom right now, but I have them displayed on the walls, and so they know when they're coming into the classroom, and we practice this within the first few weeks, and they know when we're coming into the classroom how we're supposed to act. So that gives everybody a clear expectation behavior-wise. Now, when it comes to learning, I also keep them to high expectations and make sure that they know their specific goals, because every student is different and every learner is different, and they're going to be higher in some things and lower in others. And so working together to set a goal for them specifically and individually really helps them see, okay, this is my goal, this is my specific goal. I don't need to compare myself to anybody else. I am just focused on what I need to accomplish in the classroom. And so being sure that we set those up with students, and I've done that a lot throughout my student teaching, is with this higher group, okay, we're going to work on this skill this week. We are going to nail this part of it and specifically work on this thing. Or for instance, for my learners who maybe need a little bit more support, we're working with the same material that those high students are working with, but we're just doing it at a level that they can comprehend, and with that giving them different adjustments. So for instance, if somebody really struggles with handwriting, I've actually highlighted and written out the words and then have them trace over it, because then it's legible for me to see, they can understand it, and they're spelling things correctly, and they're practicing that good format and not just willy-nilly it and making it to where it's not really what we are expecting from them. And so again, just having those high expectations and having them have their goals and being okay that maybe my goal doesn't look exactly the same as somebody else's. It's really just a growth within themselves.
Awesome answer. So the next question is going to be about your reflective practice.
Yeah.
And so I'd like you to tell us about a time you changed your teaching approach based on student feedback and your own reflections over what goes on in the classroom. And what did you learn through that process?
That's a really good question. I would say that I always am asking my students for feedback because I always want to know what they are eager to learn about or what really sparks in them. And so whenever we go through lessons, or especially in small groups, whenever I'm working with them, I'll ask them about, okay, what do you enjoy within all of this, and what do you specifically like to do? Or is there a strength that you have, and is there a weakness you have, and how are ways that we can work around that? And so with that, I really try to work with can you repeat the question again?
Sure. The question is about reflective practice, and the basic
Yeah.
idea is this. When you get done at the end of the day and you
Yeah.
reflect on your classroom and you
Yes.
reflect on student feedback,
Yes.
give me an example of how that reflection actually changed what you did going forward,
Mhm.
right? And what you learned from this process.
Yes, okay, perfect. I got it, Dan. Sorry. So, for instance, one thing that we did in our classroom was we were working on biographies, and we had never done biographies before. We had only written about ourselves in narrative form, and so with that, I knew that the students were probably going to struggle a little bit, and with that, I built it into an I do, we do, you do model so that they could gradually get independence and build that confidence throughout. And I did this based on it because before in the past we had done narratives and I didn't do it that way, and we all did it together, or we all did it together, and then they instantly went to doing it on their own, and it just didn't really structure very well. So coming from that, I adjusted that for the biographies, again, since this was a brand new topic for them, and we worked through it together. So I started out and I showed them, the importance of highlighting a text and rereading it and finding our key information, and then taking that and moving it into another template. With that, I showed them again how to highlight and how to put key points onto that template. And then the next day when we came back, we did it together. So we read a story about Rosa Parks, and then we wrote about her. So in there we went through it and we read it through about 3 times to really make sure we had all of our good details from our story and really the key points of what was being said. And so then we separated it out, and I kind of helped them see, what's our main idea here? What's our facts? What is our ending? What's our overall message from it? And so we worked through that process together. And then once they felt solid in that, I allowed them to go on and do it on their own and pick their own person that they would really like to research about, and they got to do the process themselves. And by breaking this up in that sense, I learned from my past experience of not doing it in that way, and I structured it to where, again, they're getting gradual confidence and they're getting gradual independence, and not just throwing it all at them at once and building upon it with them and expanding their knowledge as we go.
Awesome, thank you. These are some really good answers. We're going to now go on to situationally based scenarios. Would you like a little bit more time to sort of refresh?
No, I'm fine.
All right, so the first question is the challenging behavior.
Okay.
So imagine a student frequently disrupts your lessons despite redirection. How would you handle the situation to support both the student and the rest of the class?
Okay, so I've definitely had a student who's been like this before, and it's really challenging at times because you don't really know exactly what the best approach is, especially if you have a student who can be kind of explosive at times. And so with that, right now what we're doing with that student is we have a chart for him, and through that we get to score every single bit of our day for him to reflect on how he's done in that section of the day. And so we're always working with him and talking with him and having him reflect on his behaviors. So that really helps with like a student who is really explosive in my experience, because we're trying to limit that explosion and we're trying to keep him at bay and keep him working towards his goals, so his specific goals. And then with other behaviors that we've had in the classroom, I've had students who were just really chatty or likes to blurt out, or some that just can't stop wiggling and moving, and we don't want to make them feel as though they're doing something wrong, but we also need them to reflect on their behavior and how it may be disturbing their learning. And so with that, I've had students where I will talk to them at the beginning of the day, in the middle of the day, and at the end of the day to address those things and have them tell me about how they feel like they've been doing, and to go over, what is to be expected in the classroom. And again, you can go towards the walls to look to see what is expected, but sometimes that can be lost in our brains. So just talking through that and saying, this this is maybe where we need to go for the rest of the day. Let's work on that. Or, celebrating the fact that they're doing really, really well and, keeping up that good behavior. Did I answer the question fully?
Yes, thank you. I'm going to pause that for a second. We'll cut this sort of out. That question is a good one, right? One of the things that your answers are all great, but be confident that if you answered it, that you don't have to do it because you sort of re-answered a couple times. Say is what you said there, or just something at transition? Have I fully answered your question? Would you like me to go into more detail, or does this answer? Something like that's good.
Yeah.
Ready? Next one.
Yeah.
By the way, these are phenomenal answers. Do you see what I'm saying?
Thank you.
But do you see, one of the ones that's so good is, and I want you to think about that, where she says, oh, I've had this happen, I've had that troubling student. That shows that she's vulnerable and willing to look at things objectively. And sometimes people get defensive and oh, if I say I've screwed up or I say something bad happens and I'm going to be in trouble, right? So thinking about that, we're going to go to the next one, which is a biggie. And the theme is family communication.
Okay.
So here's the scenario, or the idea is a parent expresses frustration that their child isn't being challenged enough. Right? How would you respond and work collaboratively with that family?
I would first. Did the person email me, or did they talk to the school?
Let's just say that they. Let's make it fun. They didn't email you. They just talked to the school, and now your administrator has said something to you. How do you handle that one?
Okay, well, first of all, I would talk to my administrator about what we are learning, and again, the measurable objectives that we're hitting in the classroom, and making sure that my administrator sees how I'm hitting all the key points that we need to be learning in whatever grade that I'm teaching. So I definitely make sure that's clear with them, because that's our main goal. And then through that, I would ask them what the parent specifically said that their student was not being challenged with, so that I can get a better understanding of what they feel is being a lack of. And then I would, depending on how that conversation goes, and if it seems appropriate to message the parent, I would message them, or even schedule an in-face meeting so that we could talk about it, and ask them specifically where they feel like their student could be challenged more, because I'm very well versed in challenging students. Sometimes I don't want to give it to them too hard, because I want to be sure that they can attain whatever we are learning. So I would definitely have that conversation with them and see, if it's in math specifically, or if it's in reading specifically, or something of that sort, or if there's certain skills that they're wanting their student to learn that they're feeling like there's a lack of. And so, for instance, say that we're in first grade and their student is really good in addition and subtraction, and they want to move on to multiplication. I would find ways that I can incorporate multiplication for that specific student, if they're to that level to where they can be moving on. If they're not, then obviously we're not going to push them to that level. But I would work with them specifically probably in small groups or one-on-one instruction, where we're working on, for instance, if we had a domino experiment and we were talking about how we can take a domino and add the two sides together and get our answer, our sum. I would do that, but I would change it to multiplication for them. So I would say, okay, we have a 1 and we have a 3. How are we going to multiply that together? And just talk them through that. And if I have that time to sit one-on-one with them and talk about it with them first, so I can instruct them on how to do that. And then from there, giving them little problems that can maybe be incorporated into whatever else we're learning in the classroom, to give them that challenge that they're seeking.
Awesome. And so the last question that we have is going to have to deal with inclusive practices. Okay? And so here's the question. You have a new student who has an IEP and needs support staying focused during independent work.
Okay.
How would you plan to meet their needs while managing the rest of the class?
Okay, do they have a para?
Yes, let's say they have a para. Let's see how this goes.
They have a para. Okay, and you're saying that they're not focusing, right?
Right. They have an IEP, but they also they struggle staying focused. They're a little bit off task.
Okay, I definitely have had students like this, and I love them to death. They're awesome because their mind goes a million ways, and I just love that. I love the fact that they can think so out of the box sometimes. And with my specific scenario, I didn't have para support in this instance, and so again, I would probably do one of those check-ins with them, beginning of the day, middle of the day, end of the day, to kind of regroup with them and see how they're doing throughout the day and have them reflect on their behavior. And with that, I would also probably try to call on them more throughout our lessons to be sure that they're actively engaging and make sure that they are listening to me, because if they're not listening to me, they're not going to be able to answer the question. So I would probably work with them on that. And again, when I'm floating around the room, I would probably make sure I'm standing closer to them to make sure that they're focused on their behavior and what they need to be doing. If it is to where I have given them too many redirections, I would probably send them to the safe seat, which is a seat in our room that can kind of get students away from their peers and their desk, because that can be a major distraction to them at times. So I would probably move them away and see if that helps a little bit, and see if that will do the trick, because usually it does. So that's what I would first do with that. Now, if I did have a para support in the room, I would definitely go over the expectations that I have for the child with the para, and I would have her, him, whoever, work with that specific student on doing things that fit that expectation, and having goals again for that student, for them to see, for them to work on what they're doing in a constructive manner, to where they're focusing on the lesson being taught. And again, just going over that expectation with the para and making sure that they understand what I'm expecting and what I want them to work on with their specific student.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.